Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another player interview. This time we're here with Markus Kantarci, the man behind Shenron's Lair, with his first place San Diego deck profile. So Markus, why don't you say hi, and why did you decide to play this deck? I know there's like a whole process, like a whole thought process we talked about on the team. So walk us through why you played this deck.
What's up, guys? So playing this deck is actually kind of a funny story. There's a little bit of technical and intelligence behind it, and there's also a little bit of laziness behind it. And the laziness being, I played this deck at Pasadena and I performed pretty good, not as good as I hoped. And since Pasadena until this regional, I was so swamped with school and some events and personal things that I just didn't have time to test out other decks. So I felt like, deck mastery is more important than the actual deck strength. So that's why I took this deck. So that's the laziness factor for sure. But I do also think that it was a good pick, especially because of all the Janemba running around. Brawly Height has always been a favorite of mine for its ability to play aggro or play control into Victory Strike. So I thought it was a pretty good pick going into the meta.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like, we talked about it as a team a lot, and like, again, some of the big decks like Toa and Janemba Victory Strike just seemed like a really big deal. Like, it seemed like a really good pick going into the weekend. So we'll get into the list. So this is very, very different than like Jamal's Otakon list, which, like, again, we all pretty much worked on as a team. And this list is a little bit less aggressive. Like, it's still pretty aggressive, but it trades in some of those features for like Roshi Shen, for example. So like, for the longest time, like our team hated Roshi Shen. So talk about why you decided to play that and like where that kind of changed.
Yeah, so I actually hated Roshi Shen too for the longest time. And what happened was, in testing, I kept losing to Toa, and I just couldn't beat Toa. I didn't know what to do against it, whether I aggro or whether I try to go for Victory Strike. I just always lost to Toa, and it was really frustrating. And the night before, which I hate doing this, but Chris Welch recommended that I go Roshi Shen against Toa because it would help that matchup draw 2. Plus, it's also really good against Janemba because, it lets me find my pieces faster. So I was like, you know what? All right, I'll put in Roshi Shen. And I took out cards like Nimbus. I used to have the 2-drop Caulifla. I played 2 Universe 7 reps instead of 1. So I took out all these dead cards that were dead against the big 3, being Toa, Janemba, and Shenron. So I took out about 6 cards, and I put them in my side, or I just cut them out completely. And instead, I main decked Roshi Shen, which is really good against Janemba, and possibly against Toa, but it actually didn't come up throughout the weekend. So mainly, it was really, really good against Janemba. It was by far an overperformer in that matchup. It guaranteed me that matchup all the time.
Gotcha. And that's pretty interesting because, like, obviously you're adding more card draw, which you would think would be like counterintuitive against Mill, but I guess just like, finding the Victory Strike was super important, obviously, because that really just wins you the matchup. So moving on to the 1 Universe 7 rep, was this card even worth playing at 1? Like, how come you just kept the 1 copy in there?
Yeah, so once again, it was like a late night decision. I didn't really know what to put in there, but I did know that because of all the prevalence of Janemba, that I kind of wanted some main deck hate against it. And I really like having Universe 7 reps against Janemba because as they mill you out, if you haven't seen Victory Strike or had a mastery yet, it's a good way to see it. And it was just a one-of, so a lot of times it was either energy or sometimes I had that 1 extra energy before I end my turn, and I would just play it just to get it out of the way and hopefully, plus a card from it. I liked it at 1. I would still keep it at 1, to be honest. So I would still main deck 1.
Gotcha. And then we go into the negates. We've got Time Magic and Bloodlust, the staples. Then the swap package. So Grandpa with the 3 Gohans, 2 Gokus, and 3 Geens for like your your 2-drop spam. So we also never really played the Gohan for the longest time, but it seems like everyone who's playing Height of Mastery in like the modern format is playing the barrier Gohan. So why is this card important? And do you ever just wish it was like more 15Ks?
I've been pretty happy with its performance. I think there's a lot of counterplays like Vegeta the Cruel, for example, and Gohan kind of keeps you safe from some of those counterplays. It also keeps you safe from Time Ruler Toa, and that's a hard matchup to begin with, so you kind of want your guys protected. A lot of times I would swap into the Gohan and just pass turn, and then when it comes back to my turn, I would swing with him then, and then swap him out. So it was more so to guarantee that my body on the board stays alive, because there's a lot of little ways to remove things, whether it's counterplays, negates, time roller toas. So I wanted that barrier 2-drop to keep me safe for one turn.
Gotcha. And then just going through the rest of the swap package, obviously we're playing, Path of Greatness into height. So how often did your height slash Victory Strike engine get interrupted? How often did it go off? How did that work out?
So I always game plan to go into Victory Strike only against Janemba decks or slow decks. And nowadays everything is really fast, so you really don't have time to go into Victory Strike, and unless you're playing against Janemba. So against Janemba, it came up all the time. That was my only way to win the matchup, and I played against maybe four Janemba matchups, and I 2-0'd all but one. I 2-1 one of them because they milled my Victory Strike game 1, and I just scooped right away.
Gotcha.
But everybody else, I just 2-0'd really fast. It does get interrupted by Champa the Trickster. They do usually always play that counter card to rest on my Height of Mastery, but my leader card being able to restand, and I save my Awaken for that big play. Usually there's just no getting around it. Janemba got to the point nowadays where it's not as aggressive as it used to be, so all they focus on is just milling you out, which means I have a lot of time. So there was actually one game where I played Height of Mastery, and then I just passed. And then he can't remove my Height of Mastery, so it came back to my turn, and I have 5 open energy, and it was just, I had all the options in the world. I had the ability to play Victory Strike, swing with it, and play cooler in case they Mufuba'd my Victory Strike.
Yeah, passing turn that up is really funny, and I think that is a big fault of the Janemba decks, like the green, blue, yellow ones, not playing removal. So that's pretty funny. You can just play height and just pass turn. I think that's pretty hilarious. And then for the aggro, we also have the 4 Source of Power. This card has always been super good in the aggro version of Swap. And then the 3 coolers. So I think it's been obvious for a while, but Mira, Champa, and Battering was the alternate win condition of this deck. So we kind of found that Cooler is basically just as good, especially on turn 4. So how clutch was Cooler over the weekend?
Oh, it was super clutch. So many games it came up, so many games it took people by surprise. There were some games where it guaranteed me the game. I know one game in particular, it was against Shenron Ramp, where I was going second, and I swapped into Source of Power turn 2, and I just kept swinging at him really, really hard, and trying to deal as much damage as I can. And I think, it was on turn 2, I was able to Awaken, so I had, some energy to work with, and I put him to 1. I swung with a battle card, and I dumped my hand with Champa, and I brought him from 3 to 1. Because in my hand I had Mira and a cooler, and I knew it was going to be his turn 3, and he can't really do anything on turn 3, so he took the attack and he went from 3 to 1, and he didn't want to invest 50-60k combo power. And then when it came back to my turn, I just played Mira, leader effect, restand my energy, swing, and he played Reese Coercion, I played cooler, and it was a game.
That's so funny. Yeah, I mean, imagine Battering drawing 2 cards. That's pretty crazy. And yeah, I mean, this format, it does feel like against certain decks, even as Broly, that you take so much life to gain advantage, it still does feel like you can somewhat hold the Awaken until turn 4, especially if you have Roshi Shen and stuff. So that makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. Did you ever wish you had another Mira, or was the one just perfectly fine?
I thought it was okay. There are obviously some times where you wish you had a Mira or a Champa, but the deck space is really, really tight. You could probably get away with switching that one of Universe 7 rep into a Mira. Mm-hmm. But I was pretty okay with the ratios.
Gotcha. And then if we go over to the side deck real quick, the extra U7 rep for things like Janemba, and then the 2 Nimbus. And I know a lot of lists are maining Nimbus at 2 or even 3 or 4. Did you not ever feel like you really needed it in the main deck, even for things like U6?
Yeah, so in the main deck, I had 2 Nimbus for the U6 matchup specifically, but in testing, it just was never used because the top 3 decks being Shenron, Janemba, and Toa, they don't really attack you, they don't really swarm the board, so it was a dead card in the main deck, and U6 being a less popular meta deck, I told myself I'll just put it aside, and hopefully I could steal game 1 without Nimbuses and then side it in. Plus, I might never see U6 because you just never know. But
how many did you go up against?
it turned out, yeah, I played against 2. In fact, one of them I played round 1 right away, and as soon as I sat down, I was like, man, this is why I should have made Nimbus. But luckily, I did steal game 1. He went, really aggressive and tapped out, and I had Mira Champa in my hand, and so he went down all the way to 3 life, and I just Mira Champa'd him on like turn 3. It was a really fast game. But then once you side in the Nimbus, it's really good against U6.
Gotcha. And then the next card, Kaba the Revoker. Me and you talk about the card a lot. So how did that card perform for you over the weekend?
It was good. It was actually a little bit better than I thought. I honestly didn't realize it negates the attack as well. So
yeah, negate attack and negate skill.
That was really nice. Yeah, so I played it against U6. There was, I think, 2 games that came up where I hardcasted it offensively to shut off their Champovados.
Yeah.
And then I went for game and it worked. Then it also came up against the Baby Vegeta matchup in Swiss, where they went up the ape chain and they swung with the one right before the ape, the Baby Vegeta right before the big ape.
Yep.
And I negated it, and I negated its skills so he can't go into the ape. So that worked out really nice. So it was actually really good in that matchup as well. So yeah.
Excellent. Really no, I think that card is super good. Like, really, really good. So then 2 Force Suggestion Mass Saiyan, did that ever come up against like Shenron Ramp? Like, was it relevant?
Yeah, so I did side him in against Shenron Ramp. I only played against, I think, 1 Shenron Ramp throughout the whole tournament. And usually I have a good matchup to begin with against Shenron Ramp because of my source of power aggression. So there was a turn where I could have played it, but I went for a Mira play instead and dealt some damage instead, and it worked out that way. But I think it's a necessary evil. You have to probably side deck it for sure, because if they go first, they just ramp really, really fast, and they get there before you do. So I would keep that in the side for sure.
Yeah, I agree. For that deck, like, every energy is important, so anything you could snipe off is really good. And then this is a really interesting one, the Time Ruler Toa. Now, what did you want that for? That's a really, really interesting sideboard pick for this deck.
Yeah, so this was also a last minute thing where the day before I was testing against Alex Logsden from Scout Report, and I want to say we played like 3 sets of me versus his Toa, and he beat me like 2-0, 2-0, 2-0 every single time. I just couldn't beat Toa. I was getting really frustrated, I have no outs to the deck. I didn't know what to do. And then I told myself, you know what, I'm just going to be an idiot and play Time Ruler Toa and steal their Vegetas. So that was my game plan. It was like a stupid pick at first, but it actually did work out. I played against Toa in top 8, and I went second. And there was a turn where, on my turn 1, I swapped into Guinea, and I swung, and I had 4 in my drop now, ready to go. And then on my turn 2, I stole his Vegeta. And now I had a board of like a Vegeta and a Source of Power. I had like a really big board, and I dealt a lot of damage that turn. And on his turn, he had to swing into my board, which let me be more, it let me have more options basically, because he wasn't swinging at my life. So the Time Ruler Toa came in clutch because I stole the Vegeta, and then when I had the chance, I played Bardock to Overwhelm, and I actually drew a card from Vegeta, so that was really nice.
Yeah, it's pretty funny, and you do play like a lot of Overwhelm in the deck. Like, a lot of people don't want to play Overwhelm because it conflicts with Path of Greatness, but if you do it right, if you time it right, it works out pretty well. And especially when you need to be aggressive, the Bardock is really, really good. So then we have like
Guineas help a lot for that part. So the Guineas help you mill 3, so you definitely could Overwhelm back-to-back turns.
Yeah, definitely. And then there's the 2 trunks for like grabbing back your victory strike. So overall, is there anything about the deck you would change? I mean, obviously there's no need to because you won the event, but is there anything like maybe going forward you change, or like looking back you might have changed?
I honestly feel very happy with the deck and where it's at. Possibly a couple things on the side, maybe. I don't know. It's just min-maxing based on the matchup you want to prepare for at this point.
Definitely.
The time roller Towas, for sure they're not really necessary, but they do help against the Towa matchup. So if you want to prepare for that, that's a good card. But overall, I'm pretty happy with the list.
Awesome, man. So Markus, again, congratulations. And any final shout outs or things you want to say about the tournament?
Yeah, as far as the tournament goes, it was ran really nicely. So shout outs to Core TCG for that. Shout outs to Shenron's Lair. We have one of the best competitive teams, if not the best, and can't wait to attend nationals and hopefully prove our worth even more. And lastly, shout out to our sponsor, Bearded Collectibles.
Yes, definitely. And Markus, thank you again, and we'll see you next time.